The methods and approaches for dealing with this task have become familiar over the past few years, and they demand re-examination for at least two reasons. First is the effectiveness of these approaches has been ever more seriously questioned in recent years. There's growing factual evidence of counterproductive results from noble intentions. Some of that factual evidence will be presented here tomorrow. In addition, numerous political trends in recent years indicate declining voter and taxpayer support for these approaches to which some of the older and more conventional black spokesmen, in quotes, remain committed. We can at least ask whether or to what extent the policies of our times have contributed to these problems of our time. Looking ahead to the future, one of the things that we need to focus on are facts about results, not rhetoric about intentions. We need to look not at the noble preambles of legislation, but at the incentives created in that legislation. Very often legislation intended to help the disadvantaged, in fact, pay people to stay disadvantaged, penalize them to the extent that they make an effort to rise from disadvantage. One of the problems in dealing with the politics of poverty and the programs for the disadvantaged in general, and blacks in particular, is that vast empires can be built on these programs, that these programs definitely prevent poverty among bureaucrats, economists, statisticians, and many others. I think that what this betrays is a sense, a sort of proprietary conception of blacks, somewhat at variance with the spirit of the 13th Amendment. I think that if insofar as we're going to enlist the intelligence, the desires, and the commitments of blacks themselves, we have to do so by offering more choice in more areas, to let them decide what is best for themselves and not to turn that job over to academics and government officials. Thank you.
Results versus intentions. This is one concept of why I end up becoming a conservative, right? Seeing conservatism, what conservatism essentially highlighted to me is that it is an idea of political ideology that highly focuses on pragmatic, practical, and empirical observations, right? Conservatives like to base things on what they can observe and determine to be true, and generally with a guiding force such as a moral code, virtue, religion, make the assessments or rationalizations about what actually is effective in reality. For instance, what constitutes something that is good? Something that sounds good or something that actually does good? And this is my main point of why I ended up becoming a conservative, is because conservatives care, from what I can observe, more about the results of something, the outcomes of something, rather than the intentions of it. We're trying to stop racism, therefore we want to eliminate racial disparities. Conservatives go, is that something you actually can fix? And when you mean racial disparities, on what grounds do you mean? Because there's nothing in history where there's ever someone's going to have equal outcomes. Like, are you fighting for equal outcomes or equal opportunities? If it's equal opportunities in 2024, we already have that. There's nothing a white person can do that a black man can't. A black person can't. Instead, the left, and this is part of one of the reasons why I end up becoming conservative, the left use such deceptive language to push the desirabilities of something, but not actually articulate how feasible that thing actually is. And I'm going to use Obamacare as an example. Today, at the time of me making this video, America spends more on healthcare than any other nation, yet almost half can't afford affordable care. This was made July 20th, 2024. Did you know what bills passed to address this problem? Because this was a problem during the Obama administration. Obamacare, right? And healthcare is still unaffordable. Conservatives had the argument, hey, if you pass Obamacare, it's going to make healthcare costs rise. Obama came out. Obama stated, no, it wouldn't. This is one of the reasons why my father ended up voting for Mitt Romney. This is I think Obamacare passed during the 2012. But this is one reason my father voted against Obama during the 2012 election, is because my father saw that, hey, a lot of the things this guy is saying, it doesn't actually give a good outcome. And this is why I ended up becoming conservative in a way, because I've seen time and time again, the left will have a stance on something. The left will say, hey, war on poverty, this will solve poverty. Single motherhood was 24% in the black community at the time that LBJ was pushing the war on poverty. After war on poverty got passed, single motherhood rose to 50%. And now in 2024, it's almost close to 80% of kids in the black community specifically are raised by a single mom. And all the negative statistics that come along with it: higher rates of crime, higher rates of poverty, right? More likely to drop out of school, more likely not to pursue an education, more likely to end up in compromising circumstances, more likely to be sexually assaulted coming from those households. All the negative ills of society, those are the negative outcomes. And yeah, your intention was to help disadvantaged single mothers that were barely making it through, but inadvertently, you created an incentive structure that rewarded the very same behavior you were trying to fix. And this is what led me to become a conservative. Results versus intentions. That's one concept. Now, the next concept, because I broke down this video into 4 parts technically, the next concept, I'm going to point out how incentives structure a society and how government, through their policies, pushes an incentive. Let's take a look at this clip that I believe hit this point for me. Let's take a look.
The welfare system and other kinds of governmental programs are doing is paying people to fail. Insofar as they fail, they receive the money. Insofar as they succeed, even to a moderate extent, the money is taken away. This is even extended into the school systems, where they will give money to schools with low scores. Insofar as the school improves its education, the money is taken away, so that you are subsidizing people to fail in their own private lives and become more dependent upon the handouts.
We have expectations built in today about the quality of life, the quality of job, the level of income for which one expects in return. Why? Because we look at the level around us that it takes us to have a fairly decent level.
No, that's not why. I may have all sorts of expectations. The question is, what can I do? If someone else is subsidizing my expectations will be far higher. Insofar as the Center for Advanced Study was subsidizing my expectations a few years ago, I refused to work at UCLA for the normal full professor's salary. Why should I, when I can get the same money for being at the Center for Advanced Study with no hours, no duties, and no classes?
Cut off welfare tomorrow. What will they do? What will be their immediate response? At what price to their small children and to their middle-aged children? Yes, they'll get a job. In fact, the statistics show that women, in fact, are the most successful through the employment program. But what has to supplement that typically is the provision of some kind of daycare arrangement. Either the individual woman has to earn enough money to be able to pay privately for her daycare, or in fact she is, quote, subsidized through this insidious corrupting set of programs run by the federal government, which in fact makes her employable and a taxpayer. It's an interesting notion of trying to get people in a productive mode.
Tom Sowell.
It's incredible the way you start the story in the middle, as if there's a predestined amount of poverty, a predestined amount of unemployment, and that the welfare system is not itself in any way responsible for that.
There is a predestined 20% of the bottom half of the population.
I have never, that's always been true.
There's going to be 20% at the bottom.
I agree with you. It's also true that 20% of the bottom population doesn't have to be living on the government and ruled by the government.
12%.
That's right.
That's a small number. But
We're
there's
not of
still
those on welfare.
We're still talking about a significant component of the bottom 20% that are the bottom 20%. Whether they are above the poverty line or below the poverty line, they are still the bottom 20%. And the issue is, what is the responsibility of the other 80%, if any, toward those individuals?
Does your program plan to eliminate there being a bottom 20%?
No. But it intends to raise the bottom 20%. So
you're raising them by having more illegitimacy, more unemployment.
I'm not making them have illegitimate children. I hope that's clear.
Oh, I think. You don't have to do that. You simply subsidize it.
If you show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome. As you saw from that 2-minute clip, I was talking about Thomas Sowell framed incentive structures pretty well, and that's what the government essentially creates, right? It creates either empower you to do a decision or discourages you from doing the decision, right? And giving welfare, and you saw in the 1980s, the stats was like what? Maybe only the 20%, bottom 12% of people were on welfare. And Thomas Sowell made that point. Is like, hey, you're giving them leeway to continue putting themselves in this hole, making them comfortable being on welfare. And as we see from TikTok, we got all these single moms bragging about how they can buy a bunch of stuff. They can go to Sephora with their EBT cards, and the government is paying for it. And it rages a lot of taxpayers because, like she said, what is the obligation of the 80%? It's not the obligation of the 80% to be taking care of your lifestyle because you don't feel like you want to work or put yourself in a financial position where you can actually be self-sufficient. And in a way, Thomas Sowell articulates and highlighted how you are under the government's control in that circumstance. You can't be claiming you're some strong, independent woman when you're dependent on the government. And if the government says it goes, if the government says, hey, you're not allowed to vote, your butt ain't allowed to vote because you on welfare. And I think that would be fair because a part of me is like, yo, we can't continue incentivizing people to make bad choices and reward them for these bad choices. This is how we enable people into the negativity that they're in today. And then we're shocked and surprised when inflation gets out of control. Our government spending keeps increasing because we have to maintain the spending, because end of the day, government is not incentivized to solve solutions. It's not incentivized for solutions. It's incentivized for justification. The government wants to justify its authority or responsibility in your life. For example, in the clip, and this is why I end up becoming conservative, is what is the incentives? What are the incentives that the government has to actually solve your problem? It doesn't. As he articulated, Thomas Sowell asked her a direct question. What are you planning to eliminate poverty with this policy? She says, no, I'm not here to eliminate poverty. So what's the point? What's the purpose of this? For you to be dependent on the government. And then the left like to cry and holler foul when the conservatives make this point. But from Thomas's book, Discriminations and Disparities, I want to highlight a chapter of facts, assumptions, and goals, right? Many people may expect discussions of economics and social disparities to end with solutions, usually something that the government can create, institutionalize, staff pay for with taxpayer money. The goal here is entirely different. There has never been a shortage of people eager to draw up blueprints for running other people's lives. Essentially, that is what welfare is. Hey, if you make more than $2,000 a month, you'll lose your welfare, which gives you benefits equivalent to a $60K a year salary. And they will penalize you if you make $24,000 a month within a year. $24,000 within a year. They'll take away your welfare. What's that incentive? What does that scream out? We want you to stay on the system. We want you to stay poor. We want you to be comfortable in poverty. And they wonder why conservatives push back so much on social welfare. Because it is being misused to essentially bribe and control a segment of society to always vote for a particular party that's big government, usually the Democratic Party. This is another reason why I became a conservative, or I lean conservative on most issues, is because I see the incentive. And I see this as almost another form of slavery. I'm like, yo, the slaves were dependent on the slave master to give them food, shelter, clothes, and all this other stuff. Welfare is operating in that same model. And black liberals will get mad when black conservatives make the argument that you're in a Democratic plantation. It's crazy to me, right? Third point, the reality of racial disparities is one of the biggest issues that I have in the black community, because 90% of the black community votes Democrat. And this clip by Ben Shapiro was one of the most eye-opening ones for me about when you look at the data, when you look at the statistics, when you look at observable reality, a lot of these people who complain and cry and moan about racism is merely an emotional position. Let's take a look.
According to Pew Research, the net worth of white families in 2013 was $141,000. For black families, it was $11,000, even less than the $19,000 it was in 2007. According to economist Edward Wolf of the University of New York, excluding vehicles and other durables, the median black family worth is just $1,700, while 40% of black families have zero or negative wealth. White family worth, in terms of financial worth, is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't, and when You know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Ooh, behavior decides your outcome, not your skin color. And that really, I mean, I always thought this way. I was like, hey, look, like, if we mimic good behavior, like a good behavior that gives us a good outcome, wouldn't that same outcome happen in our community too? And this is what got me start to reflect on itself, because a community that always looks outside of itself will never really fix anything, because it's always claiming that someone else is responsible for the outcomes within its community, when in reality, you have more impact over your outcomes and than outside sources. And this is one of the things when I look back in history, when I look at some notes from Black history, or I'm looking through histrionics that affect the Black community specifically, I'm like, oh, we had high marriage rates in the 1920s. What happened? I just finished mentioning welfare. Welfare incentivized the Black community to reward certain behaviors, and these certain behaviors give us the current outcome that we're experiencing today. And as a Black man, right, that I'm trying to say, hey, we keep voting for the same party that advocated for this stuff. Because remember, the Black family survived Jim Crow, the Black family survived slavery, but the Black family could not survive the liberal mindset. The liberal mindset of you are helpless because of your skin color. Oh, Black people can't do nothing for itself. It needs the government to help it. It needs the government to free them. But every incentive structure that the government has created, it has incentivized the Black community, aka Black culture, to adopt values, ideas, and behaviors that are actively, objectively destructive to its own community. And this is one of the strongest reasons why I am a conservative, because I'm a Frederick Douglass kind of conservative. Government do nothing for me, because every time government got involved in anything, it made the outcomes worse for the Black community. Not better, worse. Maybe the current generation, when that policy was implemented, it benefited them, but at the expense of future generations. And this is what the main issue, my main critique about Black culture, is that the previous generation got to benefit off of the policy that supposedly it helped us, and then the younger generation faces all the negative outcomes of that policy, and then the older generation has the gall to tell the younger generation, oh no, you can't do nothing because of this country. You're a Black man in America. You're always gonna be seen as an N-word. Niggas don't read, right? You're gonna say all this dumb crap to your younger generation, poisoning their minds, saying that the cops are gonna shoot them for no reason because they're walking black. You demonize cops. You warp your youth's impressionable minds to condition them to see themselves as less than. You put an inferiority complex on them. You say white people are successful in this country not because of their own merits, not because of the behaviors that they display, because of the color of their skin. Using racism to justify racism, and then you wonder why there's so much racial division in our country today. Because Black Americans in this country, multi-generational, foundational Black Americans, whatever the hell you want to call yourselves, you guys don't have an objective view of the reality of racism in 2024. Black immigrants, on average, have a higher income than native-born African Americans. How is that the case? If racism is still a problem in 2024, why aren't Black immigrants struggling at the same rate as African Americans that were born here for generations? Make that make sense. It keeps pointing back to culture, your incentive structure. What does your society, what does your community expect of you? You want to talk about white people, you're going to keep comparing yourselves against white people when white people are at the bottom of the top income earners. The top income earners are all from Asia immigrants. Asian Americans are dominating when it comes to income, but the Black Americans, the pro-Blacks, the victim Black people, they never point out, hey, Asians are a minority in this country, and they have the highest average income. They don't get denied loans for homes at the same rate as the Black community, because the Black community don't want to look at itself critically. It wants to find blame. It wants to use racism as an alibi. And that's what made me a conservative, when I realized that. The left is just giving excuses for black people for them to stay in their party. That's why they pander to black people. They'll pander to black people, tell black people what they want to hear, and the black people will reward them with 90% of their vote. But no actual solution is happening. No actual progress is happening in the community. You give black women all these jobs, but then we're still in a negative net worth. The most educated group of women in America, black women, like to push this narrative, but your community's still at the bottom. And then you're going to cry about generational wealth. We kill each other at a higher rate than any other group of people, 5 times more than any other group of people kill each other. Yet the minute a white cop hit a black person, oh my God, racism, Black Lives Matter. But Black Lives don't matter when another life takes it. Make that make sense to me. And this is one of the things that really, really made me conservative, is the deception of the left. The final clip I'm gonna show all today is Larry Elder. I watch a lot of Larry Elder stuff, but I think this point really hit home about the race hustlers and why I really have a disdain for them. So let's check out Larry Elder and the deception of the left. Let's take a look.
Now, the next rich black host telling non-rich black people that racism is stopping them from becoming rich and black, Van Jones. And Mr. Jones, of course, is a foot soldier in the battle against institutional, systemic, and structural racism. Remember election night, 2016?
We've talked about race. We've talked about everything but race tonight. We've talked about income. We've talked about class. We've talked about region. We haven't talked about race. This was a white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president in part. And that's the part where the pain comes.
Just how bad is it out there? Real bad.
People have talked about a miracle. I'm hearing about a nightmare. It's hard to be a parent tonight for a lot of us. You tell your kids, don't be a bully. You tell your kids, don't be a bigot. You tell your kids, do your homework and be prepared. And then you have this outcome, and you have people putting children to bed tonight, and they're afraid of breakfast. They're afraid of, how do I explain this to my children? I have Muslim friends who are texting me tonight saying, should I leave the country?
Goodness gracious sakes alive, every man for himself. But white lash has not stopped Mr. Jones. Now, we don't know his salary or his net worth, but check out this little nugget from a celebrity gossip magazine. Van Jones has quite a great earning through his professional career as a news commentator, author, and attorney. Jones has managed to amass a great fortune in millions of dollars through his several attorney projects, shows, and his books.
I always used to take issue with the sellout point, right? Black community like to say, oh, you're an Uncle Tom sellout. How much these white people paying you to say this stuff? And I go, well, Van Jones getting paid millions of dollars to tell you a narrative that's not necessarily true. Now, racism is a problem in our country, but it's a minor one. That's my argument. That's a many black conservatives' argument. That if you told me, Kenny, put a number on how much of a problem racism is in my life, I say 4%. 96% of the time, racism isn't a problem in my life. Racism is a personal issue. There's no institutional racism. There's no systematic racism. The only thing that's systematically racist is affirmative action. If I'm going by definition, because you're excluding white people and Asian people, because you having a different standard on Asians and white people to get the same outcome as black people, because you believe black people has to have equal representation, even though black people don't have equal skill in a certain field. And the reason I know this is systematic racism, or affirmative action that I'm talking about, if you look at the NBA is 78% black. For 13% of the population and you're 78% black, sounds like the NBA needs more representation. Oh, wait, it doesn't? If it's good for one, it's good for all. Consistency, two-way street. And this is how I know that it's systematic racist, because if the disparities are in a certain minority group's favor, you don't want to implement DEI. But if it's the supposedly minority, that the majority that y'all guys hate so much, then you want to apply affirmative action. right? And this is the insincerity and the deception of the left that I noticed so far, and that's what made me a conservative. Because conservatism seems to be like, hey, one rule for the entire nation. We don't give special treatment here. It's just like a game of basketball. You try to call the game as fairly as you can, and how you call something fair, it has to be applied consistently. If it's a foul for one person on the other end, it has to be a foul here. You can't be like, oh no, this is discrimination. You can't create different standards based on my skin color. But then when we do it for affirmative action, oh wait, we want to rectify discrimination when most people who are benefiting from affirmative action wasn't a slave, didn't face racism at the same level as Martin Luther King and the gang. Yet you want to piggyback off the previous generation's struggle and adopt it as your struggle when you have a easier time compared to black people in the past. This is my problem with the deception of the left. And it's merely used, and this is my argument, Van Jones is, by the category of the pro-blacks, is a sellout. Because, hey, look, you're on CNN, you're a Democratic operative, right? You push these policies, you're part of the party that push all these policies that kind of guided us down this path of poverty, stagnation. People always complaining about the problems that they're dealing with in the black community, yet you're still talking head for them. Yet you're still telling black people who've been voting for this party loyally for 60 years to continue voting for them and not call it insanity. But then when black conservatives voice their alternative views, we get demonized, we get labeled, we get called traitors to our race. And I'll call black Democrats political chumps because you guys are mad about the fact that they're going to pass over Kamala Harris. But when they do pass over Kamala Harris, what are you going to do about it? Black Democrats? Nothing. Because you've been paid to essentially guide the black community like shepherds, like sheep to a slaughter towards the Democratic Party, even though their policies have given us negative outcomes. Inflation went out of control the minute Biden got into office. Lowest inflation in 3 years. We lowered inflation compared to, but you started the inflation, Biden. You create the problem, then you market that you gave the solution and you want to take credit for that when you should be penalized for that. And this is the deception of the left that really pushed me to become a conservative. Because I always feel like for the left, they're always trying to manipulate you into a position. They're always trying to like trick you. And that's how the left and the Democrats always come across to me. Because when I do my research, where I look at the outcomes of these policies, I see the negative results. I'm like, yo, this is not a good thing. Minimum wage is not a good thing. People will lose their jobs if you increase minimum wage. But you keep pushing it as a good thing. How you're not tricking me? You're tricking me. But many people on the left don't seem to understand that. And I think that's why I'm also conservative. Because at least with a conservative, the conservatives say, look, this is why we're doing it. It ain't going to work. And usually they're right on the outcomes. And the Democrats or people in the middle or people who lean left, they don't understand conservatives are right until they actually experience the negative effects that the conservatives pointed out. And that's the problem I have in our politics, is that we don't debate on the merits of policy. We do hypersterica, whataboutisms, hypotheticals, narratives. Oh, Trump's going to end abortion. When did he say that in his platform? Nowhere. He said no, I'm done with abortion. I wanted to put it back to the states. I did that. I'm good. No. Deception. Oh no, look, you mega extremists, they're gonna cancel Social Security. They made it a game of who's more likely to believe who. And they use money to just spam campaign ads, and whoever outspend the other usually wins the election. And I don't like the state of how politics has become today. And that's why I became a conservative. I'd like to hear your thoughts about some of my points in the comment section below, some of the videos that I chose to pick. I have all the videos, the full videos, in the link in the description below if you want to skim through them. There was many videos that influenced me to become conservative, but those are just the 4 that I remember really leaving an impression on me. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.